and across the diaspora. Welcome to the Prime Minister's regularly held press conference. It's always a pleasure to be here with you. I take this opportunity to say a special welcome to the members of the media who really are the ones who will be fielding questions this afternoon once the Prime Minister makes his presentation and updates you on matters of national interest. I want to say thank you to the media houses that are carrying this press conference live on their various platforms. This press conference is being carried live by Freedom FM, Sugar City FM, Vaughan Radio, Win FM, ZIZ Radio and Television, as well as on the social media platforms of the St. Kitts and Nevis Information Service and ZIZ. You can find it on their Facebook pages and their YouTube channels. One announcement before the Prime Minister takes his position to speak with you is to let you know that you can now go to any health center in the Federation without an appointment to get either the AstraZeneca or Pfizer vaccine. So please note that persons vaccinated before August 30th with the first dose of the AstraZeneca vaccine can now return to their nearest health center for the second dose of the vaccine. You will be pleased to know that the health centers will be open from Monday to Saturday. So the opening hours are 1 to 4 p.m., 1 p.m. to 4 p.m., Monday to Friday for the AstraZeneca and Pfizer, as well as 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. on Saturday. Remember, after you have taken the second dose of your vaccine and 2 weeks has passed, you will be deemed fully vaccinated. So I think that makes it a lot more convenient for persons who were very interested in getting vaccinated rather. So at this stage, we're now going to invite the Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis, the Honorable Dr. Timothy Harris, to present the update from his cabinet on matters of national interest and to let you know what's happening in the Federation. Can we welcome the Prime Minister?
Good afternoon. I want to firstly recognize the members of the Cabinet and to thank them for being here. With us today are our Deputy Prime Minister, the Honorable Sean Richards, our Minister of Education, the Honorable John L. Powell, the Honorable Minister of Health, Akila Byron Nisbet, the Honorable Attorney General, Vincent Byron, the Honorable Minister of Trade, Labour, etc., Senator Wendy Phipps, the Honorable Minister of Housing, the Honorable Jean Hamilton, Excellencies of the Diplomatic Corps, we have Ambassador Michael Powell, the Ambassador Vance Amory, we have our Deputy Speaker, and we also have our Ambassador, His Excellency, Mr. Sidney Osborne. I want to recognize also the senior officers of the government who are here, and indeed our friends of the media. My fellow citizens and residents, the COVID-19 remains the greatest challenge to our country, our region, and the world at this time. I want to reiterate and re-emphasize the critical need for all of us to become more fully engaged in this fight against COVID-19. It is no exaggeration to say that we are indeed literally in a fight for our lives and livelihoods. The increasing number of deaths around the world should be a reminder to us that COVID-19 kills, and we should protect ourselves. The most critical tool in this regard is for each of us to get vaccinated now. Individuals who are vaccinated are unlikely to suffer the worst effects of COVID-19. Around the world, the majority of persons dying from COVID-19 are unvaccinated. Unfortunately, our Federation has now reported our 12th death from COVID-19, and my thoughts and prayers are with the family at this time of mourning. My government has sought to give our people every tool and every advantage. It becomes the responsibility now of every citizen and resident to use them at every opportunity. We have been and are in a privileged position in St. Kitts and Nevis to not only have a choice of safe vaccines, but sufficient quantities to inoculate everyone 12 years and over. The majority of our adult population has taken the vaccine to protect themselves, their families, and our beloved country. I'm advised that some 75.6% of our adult population have taken their first dose of the vaccine, and 66.7% of the adult population is now fully vaccinated. I am further informed that 7.2% of children ages 12 to 17 have taken the first dose of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine. We credit this to having an informed, educated, and discerning populace who understands that vaccination is our best defense against COVID-19, and indeed it remains our fastest route back to normalcy. Just next door in Antigua and Barbuda, the government issued a mandate to get its people vaccinated. Guyana has also mandated vaccination. And while our government has not yet been inclined to mandate vaccination, I strongly urge and encourage every citizen and resident to get vaccinated soonest. We need all hands on deck in this fight. Too much is at stake. The quality of our lives and the security of our livelihoods depend on it. The safe and full reopening of our country depends on it. Our successful return to a vibrant tourism industry depends on it. And the jobs of our taximen and thousands of workers in hospitality and tourism depend on it. More and more measures are being taken around the world, in just about every country, for the protection of its citizens. The United States of America is now requiring proof of vaccination for entry into its ports. This new requirement starts in November. Canada already has this requirement, and other countries are sure to follow. Universities are also requiring proof of vaccination. We should therefore pay heed to what is happening elsewhere. Companies all over the world are making vaccination a requirement for a safe workplace. Choices are being made for the protection of staff, their customers, businesses, and institutions. We too have choices to make. We too must consider and make choices for our own protection and the protection of those around us. We have seen the fluid nature of this virus. What we know for certain is that the higher the percentage of persons vaccinated, the safer our shared space. Many persons are rightly concerned about the impact of COVID-19 on our schools and the disruption of family life and work organizations as parents are called upon to monitor their children at home. Our children are our future. For them to play a constructive role, we must ensure that our actions, or lack thereof, do not deny them in classroom learning opportunities. The right choice is for all to get vaccinated, but more so for parents and guardians, adults in our homes, our teachers, and indeed all who work in our schools must get vaccinated. Health facilities and our security forces, also these workers should get vaccinated without further delay. This is not just the right thing to do, it is the responsible thing that each of us must do. We cannot forever remain in a semi-bubble. This country has to open up fully at some point to business, to students, to tourists, to investors. Tourists will again walk our shores. Ironically, the greatest threat of COVID-19 infection comes not from incoming travelers, but the persons closest to us, our family members, our friends, our colleagues, and indeed those with whom we work. These are the people around whom we often fail to wear our masks, or we wear them inappropriately. These are the people among whom we do not often hand sanitize, nor do or practice social and physical distancing. And it is for these reasons, it is to them that we owe and hold that sense of responsibility to protect them and indeed to protect ourselves. Vaccination is the best protection for us, and it is the best manifestation of that responsibility and commitment. So again, I urge everyone to get vaccinated urgently. 2 COVID-19 vaccines are currently available in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis, the Pfizer-BioNTech and the AstraZeneca Oxford vaccine. The health centers are now accepting walk-ins for either of these vaccines. So if you are waiting your second dose of the AstraZeneca, you can now do so today, tomorrow, any day of the work week. And similarly, if your preference is for the Pfizer, you can now go to any of our 11 health centers on St. Kitts and 6 at Nevis and be administered your dose. The direct cost to our health system to contain COVID-19 and prevent our health system from being overwhelmed has been very high. The federal government has so far spent $18.4 million since March 2020 to procure equipment, additional manpower, including the cost of Cuban and Filipino medical brigades, other physicians and specialist support, pharmaceuticals, particularly vaccines. Funds were also spent to procure vehicles, retrofit wards and health centers, to rent quarantine facilities, and to provide testing support. An additional $5 million was just recently approved by the Cabinet for the Ministry of Health to continue its fight against the COVID-19 to the end of the year. This budgeted expenditure then will be in excess of $23 million. And that is just in relation to COVID-19. Imagine how many people we could have provided a new home for. Imagine how many other infrastructure projects we could have undertaken. $23 million. We have also spent millions of dollars to make our early child care facilities and schools fit for purpose. We have spent around $1.3 million to enhance our national security system and to train and recruit quarantine officers for the islands of Nevis and of St. Kitts. Additionally, the federal government spent $2.7 million to retrofit and upgrade the RLB International Airport to protect all employees, visitors, and indeed all who use the facility. My government has, at the fulcrum of its four-pronged strategy to fight COVID-19, a life first strategy. I mourn with those who have lost loved ones owing to COVID-19, and I reiterate that the loss of one life to COVID-19 is one too many. The power, however, is with us to defeat COVID-19. We empower ourselves by utilizing all, not some, all the tools, including the precious vaccines. I want to take this opportunity to commend our hard-working healthcare workers for what they have done in service to humanity and to the people of St. Kitts and Nevis so far. The way forward, as we learn to live with the virus, our objectives are, inter alia, to have 80% of our population inoculated with at least their first dose of the vaccine by the end of November, to achieve a 70% target adult population fully vaccinated, to have over 80% of our students between the ages of 12 to 17 years vaccinated by December 31st. With such a high vaccination coverage, assuming we realize these objectives, we will then be able to prevent future disruptions in our schools and indeed in our country. Fourthly, we will conduct more focused contact tracing such that the results can be obtained in a more timely manner and that the laboratory system does not become overwhelmed. We certainly regret delays recently that has been experienced by some in securing their results. And finally, should we achieve those desired objectives, we could then begin to look at reduction in the quarantine period for fully vaccinated inbound passengers. And the emphasis there is on fully vaccinated passengers. We will continue to strengthen our health system. Indeed, we anticipate that in October this year, we will receive and commission a field hospital with a capacity of at least 40 beds. These will provide a further buffer for the health system in our efforts to care for those infected by COVID-19 and indeed in the event of any serious natural or man-made disaster. The government is prepared to provide tax waivers and tax holidays for persons involved in providing specialized health services and, of course, in any matter related to the COVID-19 control. Our success in containing and reducing COVID-19 is the key determinant and how quickly we can get our economy on track and put more people to work. Work has always been important to the Team Unity administration, and that is why in our first term, we presided over the highest level of employment in our country's history. By the end of 2019, the Social Security Board recorded that we had over 28,900 contributors, the highest in the history. We have to put the country back to work again by providing opportunities for businesses to create jobs and for our people to earn incomes. The critical economic drivers offer opportunities for our people to work in areas of agriculture, tourism, manufacturing, and construction, to name a few sectors. I want to give a brief update in some of the developments in these areas. Our farmers and fishers continue to deliver on their mandate to feed our nation and generate foreign exchange savings as more is being produced here. Take the fisheries subsector. For the period January to August 2021, fish landings were 509,700 pounds, with a landed value of $5.7 million. I am advised that this represents a 23% increase in output over the comparative period in 2020. 23% is a significant movement. Our Department of Marine Resources is reporting that as at the end of August this year, we had 1,294 registered fishers. This represents an increase of 81 over the 1,213 fishers at this point in 2020. And these are some of the largest figures we have had in terms of active fishermen in St. Kitts and Nevis registered with the Department of Marine Resources. I must encourage our fishers to register as self-employed persons with the Social Security. Social Security protects all workers at their times of vulnerability, including providing a pension in their old age. A look at the manufacturing sector shows that this sector has been resilient. It has created direct employment for over 1,200 persons. Jara Limited is the largest employer in 2021 with 253 employees. We have Carib Brewery with an employee roll of 160, Cajola 157, and Harrisova with 122, to name some of the more significant players. All these entities are part of our manufacturing export enclave sector and is contributing to our GDP in real terms in spite of COVID-19 challenges. So we are basically seeing a recovery within the manufacturing sector. And it means also that our entities in that sector continue to be relatively competitive, that notwithstanding all the difficulties of the pandemic, the increase in transportation costs of their inputs, generally, they are still able to do business. And this is important and a commendation to the quality of work being produced by our people in all these factories. A look at the tourism sector, we know that this one has been among the hardest hit by the COVID-19 pandemic. We continue our efforts to market our destination, and we are optimistic about tourist arrivals for 2022. As we speak, the Minister of Tourism and other officials are out of country promoting our destination. The construction sector continues to provide increased employment opportunities. With a number of capital projects ongoing and the implementation of a new middle-income housing project at Keyon, we expect even more persons to find employment. Private sector housing projects are expected to begin in the near future at Douglas Estate, St. Peters, Cunningham, Keyon, and Borio. Finally, I wish to provide a brief update on the outcomes of our second stimulus package. The income support component of our stimulus package has been helpful to many persons who have lost their jobs. Recall, under this element, we are providing $1,000 per month for over a 3-month period for those who had remained unemployed at the time we had announced this particular initiative. Job losses were significant in tourism, in manufacturing and construction as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. So far, my government has paid out $4.6 million to over 2,000 successful applicants. A third tranche of payments will be made later in September. To ensure the largest number of persons or applicants benefit, any claim initially disapproved will go through a second round of vetting to ensure that no deserving applicant is denied. This is the hallmark of a caring and compassionate government and testament to our efforts to ensure that no one is left behind. Checks will be processed monthly until every qualified applicant receives his or her payments, a maximum possible of 3 tranches. Payments will cease once the applicant is restored to employment. Our fuel subsidy program has so far paid out $81,600 to bus operators. Our disability support program has benefited 142 families. The total payout to date under this program is $163,500, including a one-off payment of $15,000 in support of Addie's Place at Greenlands. That is a school, of course, which takes care of our citizens and residents with disabilities. Our stimulus support to the agricultural sector continues. Indeed, just yesterday, Monday, a specialized container truck costing $181,000 was handed over to the abattoir. This will assist farmers in preserving the quality of their meats and offer healthier products for consumption by our citizens, our residents, and visitors. On Monday, the Treasury processed payments for September totaling $2.7 million, bringing the total payout under that program for the year 2021 to date to a significant $24.1 million. It is truly remarkable that in times of hardship everywhere, our people can count on my government to provide some measure of support. My government will continue to do the very best we can do to support our citizens and residents, particularly the vulnerable, the elderly, and the very young. I would pause at this time to entertain any questions from the media.
Good afternoon, all. Carla Berridge, ZZ Broadcasting Corporation. A couple of questions. What plans are in the works to revive the entertainment sector? Are considerations being made as to when larger entertainment events will be allowed? And can we have updates on the traffic lights and on the food court for food trucks that should be just above the Independence Square?
Could you repeat your first 2 questions, Ms. Barrage?
Sure. What plans are in the works to revive the entertainment sector? Are considerations being made as to when larger entertainment events will be held? And an update on the traffic lights.
Any other questions? The matter to do with the entertainment sector will be addressed by the Minister of Entertainment, the Honorable Deputy Prime Minister will present an update with respect to the traffic lights, and I'll ask P.S. Collins, who is here, to give us an update with respect to the North Street vendors area that's being developed. So, Minister Byron Nisbet, please.
Good afternoon to everyone, and thank you very much for the question, Ms. Berridge. About 2 months ago, the Ministry of Entertainment would have had some meetings with persons who work within or whose livelihood is affected by the entertainment industry, not just entertainers or event planners, but also persons who provide services such as lighting and sound, etc. Out of that meeting, we would have discussed ways in which we would be able to work together to safely resume events, including large events. From that, we would have had discussions with the CMO and the Ministry of Health to see the appetite for such the proposals or recommendations being put forward by persons within that space. We then would have had conversations with the police to get their input as well as it relates. Documents have been created with the recommendations, and they are currently before the task force for some more deliberations. Once we're able to meet with the task force and discuss the recommendations that are being placed before them for the reopening of the entertainment, we would then submit to Cabinet for final approval, and then we would have a better idea of exactly the time frame in which we're hoping to reopen. But we're hoping that soon enough we'll be able to have that discussion with the task force to get that rolling and moving. Thank you.
Good afternoon to everyone. Pertaining to the question asked about the commissioning of the traffic lights, I provide the following response. As we are aware, all of the lights for what has been termed as the second phase have been installed. However, a decision was taken not to commission the lights. The reason why that particular decision was taken is that in the first instance, we were doing some work on the Bird Rock and Bay Road junction. That work to some extent is still incomplete. The reason why that work is still incomplete is that a particular business entity has indicated that it would be negatively affected by the installation or the commissioning of the traffic lights. That particular matter is currently before the government's legal department for an input, for an opinion. Until that matter has been settled, we took the decision not to commission the lights. Ideally, we would want all of the traffic lights to be turned on at the very same time.
We will have Permanent Secretary John Collins.
Good afternoon. I bring you an update on the North Independence Square Street food truck vending site. The work is now complete, and this week we will see the setting up of the site in terms of the placement of the trucks in the area. The work has been quite extensive, and we have seen the collaboration between a few ministries to make this possible. The work has included, but not limited to, the fumigation of the area. You'll recall there was a large tree in that site, and it has been cut and prepared so that it can accommodate the food truck business that is there. We have had meetings with the food truck operators. The work also includes the repair of the sidewalls and the installation of a new waste management system, and also the construction of bathrooms in the area. Gravel soil has been laid and space has been provided for some 8 vendors. While we see an increased interest in the area, the idea was to provide for those who were in the area at the time when the decision was made to remove the vendors from the square. A very large 1,500-gallon underground tank was installed, and security is also being addressed for the area. So right now the site is ready, and we are installing the trucks as we speak. So by Monday, we hope to have an official start of the operations in that area.
Thank you very much. Are there any further questions, please?
Yes, Mr. Prime Minister. We have a general question asking when will the rooms at the private ward become available for general use?
Dr. Wilkinson has taken note. I could let him give a quick answer while the other questioner, media rep, comes forward. Sorry.
Thank you. I just want to remind everyone that we are still in the middle of a pandemic, and we are still going through the 3rd wave of COVID-19 in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. Just a few days ago, we were almost at full capacity with 12 persons admitted to the isolation ward. Currently, as of today, we have a total of 8 persons who are admitted. 3 are critical on the ventilator. And so there is no plan immediately to reopen the private ward for private patients. We need to get through this wave and get through this pandemic before we can even think about the return to normalcy. But the way we will get there is by persons coming forward and getting vaccinated, because the more persons who get vaccinated, the less the link between you getting infected, which might be inevitable, and severe disease requiring hospitalization. So I urge everyone to go forward and get vaccinated.
Good afternoon, Chairman Abel, SKN5. A couple of questions, Dr. Harris. Most of them are health related, but first to you. When the government came into office in 2015,
Sorry, could you repeat your name and media?
Chairman Abel, SKN5s. The question has to do, when the government came into office in 2015, there was some concerns with regards to the way how funds were spent under the previous administration, and the government had indicated that they were going to recoup the funds. Can you just indicate, was the government successful in recouping some of the funds, and how many persons would have repaid the amount that were, quote unquote, given out underhandedly? My next question has to do with the fact that we restarted the vaccination program. Can you just give us an indication, or any of the health officials give us an indication with regards to the sourcing of the additional doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine? And one more has to do with the case. Can anybody indicate whether or not, because we've been seeing double-digit cases, 20, 30, 40 cases, whether or not any one of these cases have been linked to the recent staging of the Caribbean Premier League in St. Kitts and Nevis?
The recent
staging, and if there's any connection, any links found between the staging of the Caribbean Premier League and the increased COVID-19 cases. Thanks.
Any further questions?
Good afternoon. Les Roy Williams, the St. Kitts and Nevis Information Service. There have been a number of delays in testing results, and a number of the persons in the public have become very concerned, and some of them are very frustrated in the delays in the testing results. Does the Ministry of Health have any answer to give to the public?
Thank you.
Mr. Prime Minister, I have a question on behalf of the observer, who is usually present at these press conferences but was unable to have a representative here today. The question is, how confident is the health sector in managing the number of cases now? And secondly, considering that PAHO has said there are shortages of oxygen in some Caribbean countries, is that an issue here in St. Kitts and Nevis? And thirdly, what is the Ministry of Health's position on booster shots? I also have questions sent from Vaughan Radio, who were unable to cross the waters to come here today. They have two questions regarding education. The first question asks, and they are asking for an update as to how it has been overall, considering that recently schools or classes have closed because of COVID exposure. Also, considering the COVID situation, does the Ministry of Education anticipate a complete closure of in-person learning, allowing the ministry to go completely virtual?
Okay, for this batch of questions, we will have some responses from Health, and we have the CMO and the Chief Medical Officer. We will also have the Minister of Education to respond on those with respect to the impact really on the school system, the disruption in in-classroom learning, and the way forward. In relation to the first question regarding the issues of funds, one source in which we have made some progress was in recouping those funds that were advanced to members of the former administration and which had remained outstanding for a very long period of time. I think I can say that the Honourable Marcella Liebert, via the method of deductions from her parliamentary entitlements, we have been able to recover the funds that were due to the government, which was substantial. We have also been able to recover from Senator Nigel Carty and Dr. Denzel Douglas still owes in terms of the recovery of funds, in terms of severance, advance, a substantial amount of the over, I think, 200,000 plus which he had been in arrears would have been recovered by way of the deductions from his salaries. So we continue to pursue those routes. There are other areas of concerns with respect to the SAFE. I think it was that one was called, that was a program managed by Ambassador Hazel. A number of the beneficiaries have made arrangements to have pay back some of the funds that they know were owing. So that is ongoing. Some of them are public servants, and so they have in place deduction arrangements to assist with the recovery efforts. There are other areas to do with monies, in our view, which were misappropriated in relation to the that program presided over, what is it called? Is it not the PEP? the one with Jeffrey? That was PEP? Yeah, and those matters are going through the particular necessary processes and will be brought to conclusion at some point. The additional sources of vaccines, AstraZeneca, which we have had, have come through our own bilateral outreach to a number of countries within the region and beyond. And so we have been able to access from other countries. As you know, St. Kitts and Nevis has one of the best vaccination rollout in the region. And so we have utilized more and more quickly utilize our allocation more quickly than other member states have been able to do. And so we have been able internally to make arrangement to each other to accommodate the particular status in which we find ourselves. You would recall, for example, when we got the first tranche of supplies from the government of India, Grenada, for example, was not a recipient in that first provision that was made to the OECS region, and we advanced several thousands to Grenada so that there would not be disadvantage with respect to the rollout. And so we have had a number of sharing arrangement among ourselves, whereas it were I give you today, you may give me back next week when I really have the need. Additionally, I have asked our High Commissioner in London to reach out to the British government to see if we can secure a further supply of AstraZeneca vaccine so that we continue to be able to offer at least two choices here, the AstraZeneca and the Pfizer, and of course put ourselves in a very good stead in relation to vaccine availability in the country. So I will then call on the CMO and/or Dr. Wilkerson to deal with the other issues in relation to the COVID cases, the spike, the CPL, and other related technical issues on the health agenda which have been posed.
I first want to thank Mr. Leslie William for asking a very pertinent question about the delays, because we know over the last week or so, persons were experiencing delays in their receiving their results and having to have stayed in quarantine for an extra time. And I want to apologize on behalf of the Ministry of Health for this. We feel your pain, but I want to reassure you also that we have been working around the clock to make sure that we correct this. The truth of the matter is we were in the peak of our third wave, and we were doing a significant amount of tests. Just to give you an idea, from the 1st of September to the 25th of September, over the last 25 days, we did a total of 8,431 tests. And if you consider the amount of tests per working days, leaving out the Sundays, that's about 383 tests per working day. Now we have to look at the capacity of the labs that are doing these tests. Although we have 3 labs that are working now, the capacity for Avalon per day is 20 to 40 tests per day. The capacity for QDL is 8 to 12 per day. And the capacity for NextGen is 150 to 300 tests per day, depending on whether or not they run 1 or 2 shifts. Now, of these 8,431 tests that were done, NextGen did 6,753 samples, and we need to commend them for being a major partner in terms of providing necessary testing. And we also have to look at this against the backdrop of other OECS countries that still have to send their samples to CARPHA and wait several days before they get their results back, which means that the waiting time in those places would be much higher. Just to give you some more details, of the 6,750 samples that were processed by NextGen, 627 were positive and 6,126 were negative. Over that period, 1,500 samples were done by Avalon, 135 were positive, and 1,365 were negative. And over that period, QDL did 178 samples with 13 positives and 135 negatives. Now, with the contact tracing, every every positive case, contact tracing would have to be done around those cases, and sometimes one contact would have about 40 other contacts. So you could understand the volume of work that the Ministry of Health had to be doing over the last few days. What I want to say, however, we believe that we have peaked and plateaued, and hopefully we would be on the downward side of the curve now. Yesterday, we had 19 positive cases. I do hope that the numbers continue to decrease. So again, I apologize for the delay, but I want you to understand that a number of us, we've been having sleepless nights trying to make you safe. And while persons will love to come out of quarantine early, what we don't want to do is to release persons who are positive into the community, and then we have a worsening of the situation. There was a question about the CPL. I want to say that the CPL was very successful. The patrons who were there, they were vaccinated, and I think that the tiny island of St. Kitts and Nevis demonstrated to the world how we can have mass events in the new norm. And of the cluster of cases that we've been having, and through our contact tracing, there has been no link to the CPL. And so I believe that that event was carried out quite successfully, and I want to take this opportunity to congratulate all the persons who were involved in making that a success. There was a question as to how confident we are in managing the cases. It's important for us to understand that hospitalizations and deaths can be prevented, and we know what we can do to prevent hospitalization and death. We need to get vaccinated, and at some point in time, common sense must prevail. The vaccine offers the best protection, and so if persons will go forward and get vaccinated, the health system will not be overwhelmed, and so we can control what happens. We, however, can be proud that our vaccination program so far has been successful. And I believe it was successful, number one, because the people had confidence in the message that we were giving, that the vaccines were safe and effective. They had confidence in the healthcare system that was offering the vaccines, and that's why they continue to show up on a regular basis at the health centers, though they're trickling in right now to get vaccinated. And lastly, they had confidence in the policymakers who were rolling out the decision. And so that is one of the reasons why we have one of the highest vaccination rates in the world, in the region. However, you heard the Prime Minister say that we are aiming for 80%, because once we get 80% coverage, it means that the link between severe disease and hospitalization will be significantly decreased once you get infected. However, the healthcare workers at the hospital, yes, they are stretched, but they have been doing a good job in managing the persons, and you would have heard about the recoveries, or you will hear about the recoveries from the CMO speech. In terms of oxygen, we have an adequate supply of oxygen thus far, and just recently we had a ceremony where we got some oxygen generators where oxygen can be created from room air at the patient's bedside, and we have not even started to use all of these as yet, and so we still have some room to play within our capacity, and so we have no fear right now about running out of oxygen. But again, the control, they're all in the hands of the people of the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. We can stop viral transmission by carrying out the non-pharmaceuticals that we know will protect us, and also going forward and getting vaccinated.
Good afternoon, everyone. With respect to the question about the Ministry of Health's position on booster shots. Now, some countries have gone and administering booster shots to their elderly. Now, in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis, we presently are offering 2 COVID-19 vaccines, the AstraZeneca Oxford and the Pfizer-BioNTech. Both vaccines have a 2-dose regimen, and so at present, our focus is that of administering both doses to the target populations. And so far, as you would have heard, 75.6% of the target population have received the first dose, that's the adults. 66.7% of the adults in our population, or the target population, have received the second dose or are fully vaccinated. That's a specific number of about 22,021 persons. And so our aim at this time is to get the coverage rate of the fully vaccinated up as much as possible, as close to 80% as possible. Now, in terms of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine, 7.2% of the children within the age band 12 to 17 years have already come forward and received the first dose. And so over the next 2-3 months, our focus and emphasis would be that of vaccinating our children. We already enjoy a very high coverage rate in terms of COVID-19 vaccination, and we will continue. We will continue to monitor the science in terms of the booster shots and who are eligible for the booster shots. Thank you.
Any further questions? Yes.
The
We
follow-up
did not
question.
have here for Minister Powell. We will take the question. In fact, we will take all questions, but we will hear from Minister Powell on the matter of the school.
Good afternoon, all. I believe the 2 questions were, how has it been overall in terms of education in schools, and will there be a complete closure of schools? I'll attempt to answer the 2 questions at the same time. The restart of face-to-face instruction within our schools has had some challenges, but for the most part, I believe we've been successful in doing so. The Ministry of Education began the process before we opened schools by updating a document which was created last academic year, updating it and making it public for all stakeholders, children, parents, teachers. That provides all of the necessary information in relation to school protocols, in relation to significant school dates, and that has provided a lot of support for us. The ministry continues to ensure that we provide a safe and sterile environment for children and school staff, teachers, and ancillary workers to come and to operate in. I must admit, initially we had some challenges in terms of persons not necessarily adhering strictly to the quarantine and isolation protocols. However, I must admit that we've seen a decrease in instances of persons, children who should be in quarantine coming to school. And so I commend the parents and guardians or partners in working with us to remedy that situation. I want to encourage them to continue to keep up the good work and to help us as it helps us to mitigate the transmission of of the COVID-19 virus within our schools. We have not had to close any schools for any significant length of time. What we've been able to do is isolate certain classes within schools and allow them to transition to remote learning and then back to face-to-face instruction depending on test results. This process has actually been working, and it has allowed for us to maintain face-to-face instruction for the vast majority of children in all of our schools going forward. We would have indicated that the larger schools, such as the Bastia High School and the Washington Archibald High School, we've had to bring them back on shift systems simply because of the sheer number of students within those schools. All other schools remain at full capacity and regular face-to-face instruction. Just to remind stakeholders and the press that the emergency system has 4 levels ranging from 0 to 4. The conditions under each of the levels are as follows. Level 0, a school is open for on-site instruction and all students can attend school. Level 1, school is open for on-site instruction but on shift system to accommodate physical distancing with a large school population. The students attend school at designated times. Level 2, school is open but testing and contact tracing is ordered by the Ministry of Health. A Level 2 designation is assigned when a student or staff member has flu-like symptoms or has been exposed to a positive COVID-19 case, a student or staff member whose immediate family or relative who they have had significant close contact with is in quarantine, and where a student or staff member has tested positive for COVID-19. Level 3, school is closed by the Ministry of Education under the guidance of the National COVID-19 Task Force. Now, it is important to note that a school's emergency level is not static. Schools can and have been moving rapidly from one level to another, and a school at level 2 or level 3 in a very short period of time can return to level 0. So, for example, we would have had I think it is the second year class at the Cotton Thomas Comprehensive, which had gone to level 3, which has now, as of tomorrow, will be down to level 0. So the situation is fluid, but we have confidence in the system whereby we can isolate affected classes and ensure that we maximize on the face-to-face instruction and mitigate the loss of learning.
Thank you. Is there any further questions?
Just a follow-up question. What is the status of the JNF hospital in St. Kitts and the Alexandra Hospital in Nevis with respect to COVID-19 testing? What's the capacity for that?
I come to the microphone again, Mr. Prime Minister, to ask questions on behalf of media houses who are not able to make it today. They are usually here, but a number of persons have reported that they're not feeling well, and so were unable to be present. And we're happy to facilitate by asking their questions and making sure that they get the answers they need. But 2 notices before I ask those questions, just to let people know that there will be no leadership matters this evening. A rebroadcast of the press conference will be aired in its place. So the press conference will be rebroadcast this evening at 8 p.m. and there will be no leadership matters this week. Also, National Assembly will convene on Thursday at 10 a.m. A number of important bills will be read, and I'm inviting everyone to tune into ZIZ for that. It's going to be a very important debate, and people should be aware of what's happening. So National Assembly on Thursday at 10 a.m. Mr. Prime Minister, the questions are, and these will wrap up today's press conference. Someone wants to know about the safety of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine and the development of myocarditis. And are there plans as to where the field hospitals will be placed. We have another question from Vaughan Radio. This one asks, at the last COVID-19 NEOC briefing, and NEOC means the National Emergency Operations Center briefing, Dr. Laws elaborated on the data of COVID-19 cases. There was a section that spoke to the vaccination status, and in it, there is no data for the 23.4% of the COVID-19 cases. Could Dr. Laws explain that? And the data indicated that it was as of September 18th.
Could you repeat that one, just for clarity?
Sure. At the last COVID-19 NEOC briefing, Dr. Laws elaborated on the data of the COVID-19 cases. There was a section that spoke to the vaccination status, and in it, there is no data for the 23.4% of the COVID-19 cases. Could Dr. Laws explain that? The data indicated that it was as of September 18th. And finally, these two questions are coming from SKN Newsline. They too are usually here but could not make it today. What is the position of the Prime Minister on members of his cabinet not complying with COVID-19 regulations, that is, social distancing, wearing masks, etc., as there have been complaints of ministers of government seen not observing the protocols in public? Also, can the Minister of Public Infrastructure provide an update on the situation involving Mr. Othniel Heiliger and businessman Romain Belgrove in Camps, where an illegal container structure installed on Mr. Heiliger's property is precariously perched next to Mr. Belgrove's business? The last we were told by the Planning Department is that action would have been taken against Mr. Heiliger, but several months later, the container structure is still up.
Sorry, with respect to the last question, Othniel Heiliger, who is the other party?
Romain Belgrove. The location is Camps.
Thanks. Very quickly, in relation to the observing and adherence to the COVID-19 protocols, there's only one message and one rule for all of us, that we must all try hard or endeavor best to at all times comply with the COVID-19 protocol. Of course, the Cabinet of Ministers, we try hard to lead by example in that regard. And wherever any of us is seen not to be faithful in observing these, it will be good that someone give us or any of us a gentle reminder. So you observe this social distancing, you wear your mask appropriately at all material times, particularly in crowded areas and in particularly when in company of persons unknown, even those whom you know well. It is advisable. So this is really a learning experience for all of us. We have had over 1 year of learning these protocols, and we have to be constant in our adherence to them. So we have no different message for the Cabinet as we would have for the children in the kindergarten, or we'll have for those in the secondary school, or we have for the general community. One rule is being observed. And in every area in this fight, we are sending a message for all, a consistent message. So if we say that when persons return, they are to be in quarantine, every minister of the government would comply with that. It is for this reason that when we ask the public to come forward and be vaccinated, the ministers of government were among the first to do so. So we will try to be faithful, and we say thank you for the reminder that persons are looking at us, but we hope that persons are not just looking, persons are themselves doing what they need to do to protect themselves. The issues that have come in relation to the capacity at JNF and Alexander. We will have our two doctors who are here and who would be very familiar speak to that. There's the issue that has come with respect, or has been raised with respect to the field hospital. I could say that there we have received a commitment that we will receive 2 field hospitals. The plan is one will come to St. Kitts and the other would be made available to the sister island of Nevis. We will receive one in October, and the second should follow sometime thereafter, possibly by November. The first that will come will be in St. Kitts. It is for the health experts, health planners, and the administration to make determination where ideally that should be, and they may care to reflect on that particular matter. The matters with respect to any omission on the part of Dr. Laws, she certainly would regret, and she will address that directly herself. And the final question that had been put with respect to Othniel Heiliger's structure, as I understand it, and the perceived unfairness to remain Belgrove has been put to the Deputy Prime Minister, so he will answer that one. Okay, so we will have the Deputy Prime Minister, and then we will have the other health matters being addressed appropriately.
My simple and brief answer to that question is that it has been misdirected. That particular department falls under the Office of the Prime Minister. I know that the Permanent Secretary for Sustainable Development is present, Mrs. Elrita Simpson-Brown, and perhaps she can best provide an answer.
We'll hear from our health people.
Okay, I'll start in no particular order in which the questions were asked. But first, the one about myocarditis, and myocarditis is an inflammation of the heart, and pericarditis is an inflammation of the surrounding of the heart. And these can lead to severe inflammation of the heart muscle. One can have severe long-term complications or heart complications as a result of this, and one can even die from myocarditis. It's important for the general public to know that COVID-19 disease can give you myocarditis, and the incidence is about 450 per million. And when persons get myocarditis from COVID-19, it can be severe, can lead to prolonged hospitalization, it can lead to long-term heart problems, and it can lead to death. There is also a very small risk associated with the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine and myocarditis. That risk is less than 1 in a million, and usually it is very mild and self-limiting, and almost everyone who has reported these symptoms, they recover. And so we have said all along that we have to look at the benefits and the risk, and the benefits from getting vaccinated far outweigh the risk. And so I want to encourage the 480 persons between the age of 12 to 17 in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis to go out and get vaccinated. I want to encourage all the teachers who are looking after these children to go out and get vaccinated, because we keep hearing about in-person learning and when we're going to get back to in-person learning. The answer again is right in our hands. If all these persons become vaccinated, we'll be able to have our high schools open with no closure at all. And I just want to add here that the hope for eradication of the virus or zero COVID it is not in sight right now, and what we have to learn to live, what we have to learn to do is to live with COVID-19 for now, and the only how we can do that is if we can protect ourselves from severe disease, hospitalization, and death, which is through vaccination. The question as it relates to the capacity of the lab at the Joseph M. France Hospital is about 20 to 40 tests per day. And I'm happy to say that the JNF lab should be coming on stream very soon so that we can be testing our symptomatic patients who present at the emergency room, so there would be no delay. The field hospital that we are supposed to be getting, it's a 40-bed hospital, and I want you to know, when we say that we're getting a field hospital, it doesn't necessarily mean that this comes with a CT scan and an X-ray machine, etc. And so the best place to have a field hospital is close to the hospital where you have the ancillary services. And so we have been looking at a space between medical ward and private ward. There's a big open space there where we will be in discussions with persons from NEMA and other stakeholders to determine whether or not that would be the best place to put the field hospital. So if someone needs a CT scan, X-ray, etc., they will not have to travel from an off-site to the hospital to get that. I think I answered some questions, and the CMO will just fill in wherever I left off.
The question also referred to testing capacity at the Alexandra Hospital at present. The samples from Alexandra Hospital are brought to St. Kitts for processing. Now, in terms of the NEOC press briefing on the 22nd of this month, in my report, I referred to data regarding the cases as of September the 18th. And what I said was 51% of the cases up to that date were unvaccinated. 17.4% of the cases as of September 18 were fully vaccinated. 8.2% of the cases were partially vaccinated, and 23.4% no data. Now, every case upon diagnosis is interviewed by the case manager, and one of the questions asked in that interview, are you vaccinated? And some individuals, they either refrain from answering or they seem to be unsure of the answer of a question that's either yes or no. And so we feel that most of this subset of persons are unvaccinated. However, we check and verify every bit of data that we report. And so the statistician and epidemiologists, they are in the process of looking into the COVID-19 or the national COVID-19 vaccine database to verify the vaccination status of this subset of individuals, the 23.4% of individuals, which comes into that section or segment in the pie, no data. So for now, it's no data, but once the data is verified, it will be, we will inform you in terms of the vaccination status of the cases as we go along. And so I just want to use this opportunity to speak to the COVID-19 virus as at present or currently. Now, 2, 3, 4 weeks ago, I spoke to clusters of COVID-19 cases. When we look at the data now coming out of the contact tracing process, individuals or positive cases are now unable to tell you, who they were in contact with, who were positive. And so the virus is spreading at a significant level. And so our risk of exposure to the virus when in the public space is increasing. And so we need to be very mindful in terms of our adherence to the COVID-19 preventive and protective measures. And most importantly, those of us who are unvaccinated, we are reaching out to you. Empower yourself with the facts about the vaccines. We now have 2 options. Come on board and protect yourself. So in other words, you can leave your house, go to the supermarket, go to the pharmacy, or go to the wherever, and your risk of exposure to the virus is now higher than it was a few weeks ago. And so you need to protect yourself in terms of vaccination. That's the best tool we have in our bag at this time. Wearing your face mask at all times, hand sanitization, and distancing yourself from others.
I will invite the Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Sustainable Development, to address the matter as it relates to Messrs. Heiliger and Belgrove.
Good afternoon, all. Thank you, Honorable Prime Minister. The matter regarding Mr. Neil Heiliger and Mr. Romain Belgrove, that is with the Department of Physical Planning. It has been there for a while, but it is a process that it has to go through. The department would have issued 1, 2, and it has now issued the 3rd stop order. And this order is to prevent Mr. Heiliger from continuing any other business activity that he's doing. However, if there is no compliance at the end of the time limit that they would have been given, this matter will then be sent down to the Office of the Attorney General for redress. That's where the matter is. We have issued the 3rd stop order. We're just waiting now until the time ends. When the time ends, then the matter goes down to the Attorney General for redress. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we would have exhausted all of the questions. We have a weather pattern that has been in the news for several days. We are fortunate to have here today Mr. Abdias, who is no stranger and who is the director of NEMA. I want to invite him to come forward and to use the opportunity to update our citizens and residents as it relates to tropical storm Sam, Hurricane Sam. Mr. Abdias, Samuel.
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Honorable Prime Minister. We all know that right now we are in the peak of the hurricane season, which should end on the 30th of November. At present, we have major hurricane Category 4 Sam, which is located approximately 200 plus miles east of the northern Leeward Islands. According to our local Met Office, as well as the CIMH, Caribbean Institute for Hydrology and Meteorology, it should steer off from the northern Leeward Islands. So we are expecting it to remain a fish storm, meaning that it will stay at sea and it will not make landfall. I think we should continue to pray because we have been spared. However, it's very important for us to note that we have 2 other systems that are showing signs of development. One is at 70% chance of developing within the next 48 hours, and we have another one with a 80 to 90% chance of developing within the next 5 days. So that means we have to remain alert and continue our hurricane preparedness measures. It's very important for you to note that our national framework is active and it has been tested with the last threat that we had to St. Kitts and Nevis. Our national framework with our national subcommittees, they have been actively meeting. Our volunteer corps, our district managers would have met last week to ensure that we are in a state of readiness at the community level to be able to address the vulnerable groups as well as the vulnerable areas within the various communities in St. Kitts. And also our colleagues and Nevis have been doing same. We have also been in touch with our regional and international partners to ensure that they are ready to assist if St. Kitts and Nevis is impacted. We have been in discussion with CDMO and US Southcom. As a matter of fact, we had a discussion with Southcom this morning where we were discussing the sheltering issues and also the humanitarian assistance project. This is where we are getting the 2 field hospitals from. And we got an update from Southcom regarding the arrival of the field hospitals. We were expecting to already have had them in St. Kitts as of September. We were pushing before we go into the heightened peak of the season. However, there were some major delays due to some impact of storms to the United States because they are being fabricated in the United States, and also due to the COVID challenges whereby a number of transshipment points are being affected. They have advised that one of the field hospitals should arrive in St. Kitts on the 30th of September, while the other one will arrive on the 8th of October. However, they said, according to the trainer and the manufacturer, there may be some other challenges in the arrival of the field hospitals, again, due to the impact of COVID and persons and some of the shippers, etc. So again, we want to advise the general public to do their best to continue their hurricane preparedness measures, pay attention to your properties, ensure you secure your work areas, and also do your best to look for the vulnerable. We have a complex situation where we have COVID and we are looking at the sheltering process because you see that Sam was a category 4, and if that was coming into St. Kitts and Nevis, it would have been a challenging situation during this transmission that we are experiencing. So again, I want to encourage all citizens to continue to prepare for the hurricane season based on what we learned from St. Vincent and the Grenadines when it comes to the sheltering process, is that from the lessons learned, persons would have actually left the vulnerable at home. There was limited shelters to put the vulnerable, and in St. Kitts and Nevis what we have done is identified very early the shelters that we will use, and I want to thank the Housing and Shelter Subcommittee for doing due diligence to their responsibility in ensuring that we have sufficient capacity to address the needs of the general public. I also want to take the opportunity to thank some of our citizens in the diaspora who have actually helped us with relief supplies in terms of food items. And Mr. Prime Minister, with your permission, we would have received a 40-foot container of food items through Mr. Dev Bath, I think that's the name is, Dev Bath, yes, who would have actually supplemented our warehousing capacity with food. And we have already engaged social services who will be helping to distribute the food, and we will hopefully manage some of that in the event that we are impacted. So again, I encourage citizens to continue to prepare for the hurricane season, do everything that is necessary, and pay close attention to the local media houses as well as the Met Services, NEMA, and the Nevis Disaster Management Department for information. Thank you, Honorable Prime Minister.
Thank you so much, Mr. Samuel. One final announcement. You'll be happy to know that in addition to the opening hours for the health centers I announced earlier, the Ministry of Health would like to inform you that health centers will also be open on Sundays. So from this Sunday moving forward, the BAST Sundays. So previously I announced that they would be open from 1 to 4. Well, you can go and get your vaccines from 1 to 4, Monday to Friday, and from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. on Saturdays. In St. Kitts, you can now also go to the health center to get vaccinated on Sunday, starting this Sunday, at the Bastille, Tabernacle, and Old Road Health Centers from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m., and all other health centers from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. So again, you can now also get vaccinated on Sundays. That's every Sunday starting this Sunday, at the Bastille, Tabernacle, and Old Road Health Centers from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m., and also at the other health centers in St. Kitts from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. So many opportunities for you to go out and get vaccinated if you choose to do so, and hopefully you will. Another note regarding health, there will be a special session and special presentations about the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine at tomorrow's press briefing that's held weekly by the National Emergency Operations Center, or NEOC, that takes place at 5 p.m. on Wednesdays. So if you have questions or you're yearning to know more about the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine, you can listen tomorrow evening, that's 5 p.m. It's going to be aired live on ZIZ and most local media as usual. So you can tune into that, and you can also send your questions. It's usually chaired by Mr. Lesroy Williams, and he tries to get in as many questions as possible. And with that, we've come to the end of today's press conference, which is held regularly by the Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis. And we were happy to facilitate the questions sent in by members of the media who were not able to make it here today. I want to wish all of you who are not feeling well a speedy recovery. Get well soon. We missed your presence, but we were happy to ask questions on your behalf, and we hope that you found a lot of information in the responses that were given. So take care, everyone. Safe journey for those who are here, and for those of you who are listening, remember there's a rebroadcast of the press conference this evening at 8 p.m. on ZIZ. Thank you so much for joining us today.